Welcome to the Phoenix Phenomenon. I'm your host, ghostwriter and writing coach, Roxanne McCarty-O'Kane. Thank you for joining us for another episode as we delve into the transformative process of becoming an author and talk to the change makers who know this journey all too well. Today, I have with me Dr. Andrew Browning, who is an Australian obstetrician and gynaecologist and is also considered the world expert of obstetric fistula surgery. During his 17 years of living and working as a volunteer in Africa, Dr. Browning has operated on more than 7,000 women affected by the debilitating condition, which is a result of obstructed childbirth. Andrew ventured into this field after working with his auntie and the late Dr. Catherine Hamlin in the 1990s. Since then, he has established maternity hospitals throughout Africa to prevent and treat fistulas, as well as training staff to help to heal some of the world's most disadvantaged women. A lot of this has been done through his foundation, the Barbara May Foundation. In 2019, Dr. Browning was named as a member of the Order of Australia in recognition for his outstanding contributions to improving maternal health and care for women in poverty. In his book, A Doctor in Africa, Dr. Browning shares the story of his life, including a lot of the challenges he's faced along the way, as well as paying homage to the women whose lives he has changed forever. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Browning.
Pleasure.
All right. So, in your book, A Doctor in Africa, you share a lot about your life story and also the challenges that you've faced along the way to heading into the specialization that you're in, and obviously sharing a lot of the stories of the women that have touched your lives through the work that you do. So, can you share a little bit with us about your journey into medicine and how it was that you came to be in the field that you're in today?
I well, where does the journey begin? That's can go right back to when I was actually 6 years old.
Wow.
I was raised in a Christian household, and I used to spend every Sunday morning at Sunday school at church. And one Sunday morning, we had a returned missionary, missionary nurse that the church had supported for years in Tanzania, and she had returned and was giving an update to the church about what she had been doing. And I was sitting on the floor at her feet in the Sunday school room and listening to all sorts of stories about serving God in Africa and what she was doing as a nurse and helping the people there, and hearing stories about lions and giraffes and tribes people and spears and bows and arrows and all sorts of things. So, a 6-year-old boy, my imagination was immediately captivated. And from that moment, I thought, oh, I'm going to be a missionary doctor when I grow up. So it was that thought never left me, and it was a rather romantic sort of notion as a childish 6-year-old boy full of fantasies. But as I grew and went through school, was able to get into medicine and grew as my strength as a Christian too. I thought, yeah, this is a wonderful way to live out my faith by serving the poorest people in the world as a doctor. And so as a medical student, I found myself in the same mission hospital that nurse had been in Tanzania, right at the beginning of the Rwandan genocide, right on the border of Rwanda and Tanzania and Burundi. And we had 20,000 refugees just come into the area very rapidly at the beginning of the genocide. And I was quite involved in that. Awful stories and things, but it was a wonderful way to help people. And then as a junior doctor, working with my aunt in Ethiopia, and then got offered a job as a fistula surgeon. So from there, I had to come back to Australia to do obstetrics and gynaecology training, the specialization in women's health, and then return to Ethiopia full time as a fistula surgeon. So in a nutshell, that's 20 years of my life or whatever.
Yeah, wow, amazing. And so your auntie, was she the late Dr. Catherine Hamlin that we've seen
No.
mentioned in the book? No?
No, my aunt's Valerie, and she's been in Ethiopia for since 1974, so that's close to 50 years now. And she runs a huge aid organization to the nomads in the desert. She's done many things of her life. She has a remarkable story. I know all sorts of people like Dr. Hamlin who have done similar things in their lives. There's many hundreds of people I've met like her, all remarkable people, but Valerie is on a complete different level. She's Oh, where do you begin with her? She's lives like them nomads in the desert. She's fought with them in wars. She's been persona non grata of Eritrea and Djibouti, and chased by gunships across the desert and all sorts of things. But when she first got married into the Afar tribe, they're a nomadic tribe in the desert. And 1.5 million of them, and they didn't even have the language in writing. Very, very underprivileged people. So she first had to put the language into writing with the help of other missionaries, linguists from Oxford, and then teach people how to read and write. And then when they did that, they realized, oh, there's nothing for them to read and write. We'll have to publish books and newspapers, and so they can practice their skills. So they had to do that. Then they trained health workers, and now her organization has grown. She's still the only expat to live in the area because it's such a hostile, difficult area. And she directly looks after 1.5 million Afars with health work and dam building, road construction, veterinary work, market implementation, literacy, education, everything. So she pretty well runs and her organization runs the area. So I visited her and worked with her in the desert, running medical clinics with camels wandering across the desert under trees and that sort of thing, sleeping out under the stars, which she still does. I mean, she runs a multi-million-dollar organization, but she pays herself $50 a month. So she lives a very, very poor existence. So she lives like the Afar, and so she has their full respect and love, and she can do anything, and they'll do anything for her. So that's Val. And so I visited her, but then also I worked with her when I was a junior doctor in Ethiopia, thinking that's how I might live out my life with my aunt. But then met Dr. Catherine Hamlin, and she offered me a job as a fistula surgeon back in 1996 it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And was it a difficult decision to, choose between those two very different paths for you at the time?
No. I mean, I spent quite some months in the desert with Val, wandering around with camels in the desert, and it's pretty, very, very tough existence of getting malaria, getting dysentery, getting everything, and in 50-degree heat, and I'd have to sleep outside because it was far too hot to sleep in their little huts, and then you'd have to have a guard sleep with you with a gun because the hyenas would come close at night, and then you wake up every now and then with a gunshot because they're shooting at the hyenas, and then camel giving birth just meters away from my head, getting splashed with amniotic fluid from a camel one night, and so it was not such a great life, but you could do certainly a lot, but it was very rudimentary medicine. You didn't really need a doctor to do what we were doing. We were just treating malaria and pneumonia, dysentery, that sort of thing. I mean, Val was training the Afar health workers to do all that. So I could help educate them, but I didn't need to be down there full time. So the medicine for fistula and the fistula surgery was much more challenging as a doctor, and very addictive surgery as well. Maybe if I could explain what a fistula is, and
that would be wonderful.
A story from a patient. So I'll tell you the story of one of my patients. I've met tens of thousands of fistula women in my life, but a typical one would be which one to choose. The story of Ngolo, who was one of my last patients I treated in Tanzania. I lived in Tanzania for 7 years and set up fistula work there, and she was very typical in that she was married probably at the age of 15. They often don't know their age, but she had a few periods and she got married, so she was young. She became pregnant very quickly, and she did what most women in the world do because they don't have access to doctors and nurses and midwives. She tried to deliver at home. The nearest hospital for her was about 120 kilometers away. No roads, no communication, no money to get there. So she didn't have any option but to deliver at home. After a day of labor, Ngolo still hadn't delivered. She was what we call in obstructed labor, which happens in about 5% of women all around the world. So obstructed labor simply means the mother's pelvis, baby's head, it's not fitting out. Either the pelvis is too small, baby's head's too big, or maybe the head's coming out the wrong way. It's just getting stuck, it's obstructed. So here in Australia, that's diagnosed in labor. The midwife calls the doctor, he performs a cesarean, and everything's fine. But for Ngolo, there's no medical help. Another day passed, and after 2 days of labor, she still hadn't delivered her child. And her husband, illiterate, he'd never been to school, was frantic trying to help her. And he had the idea that if he boiled a basin of water and put her feet into the boiling water, it would stimulate her uterus to contract. He did this for 2 more days.
Yeah.
And after 4 days of labour, Ngolo still hadn't delivered. She was now unconscious, and unconscious on the 5th day of labour, she delivered a dead baby.
Mm.
It took her 2 days to regain consciousness, and when she did regain consciousness, she found that she was leaking uncontrollably from her bladder and also her bowel.
Mm.
Because she'd been in labour for so long, the baby's head had been pressed against her pelvis, and all the tissues between bladder, vagina, rectum, vagina, all had its blood supply cut off. So all those tissues died. So after the baby died, she delivered the stillborn child, and all those dead tissues came away, and she was left with a big fistula, big hole about 10 centimeters wide between the bladder and the vagina, and rectum and vagina. So fistula just means a hole. So she was leaking urine and feces every minute of every day. She was ashamed. Husband divorced her because she smelt. She went to live with her mother. The mother couldn't have her in the hut, so she put her in a little separate hut on the edge of the family compound. And unable to walk because of burns on her feet, Ngolo stayed in that hut and didn't venture out at all for 18 months.
Mm.
She was found by her mission and brought to that hospital 120 kilometres away. The doctors there weren't properly trained in fistula surgery. They tried to help her and operated on her 3 times, and it failed. She was still leaking urine and feces. She'd given up all hope of being cured, and she was trying to take her own life.
Mm.
She was found by our outreach workers and brought to me in northern Tanzania just before I left to come back to Australia. And we operated on her under a spinal anaesthetic, which means that she's awake during the procedure. And poor Ngolo had so given up hope that she could ever be cured that she just sobbed uncontrollably through the operation. So I've met 12,000 women just like Ngolo. It's quite common around anywhere in the world where you don't have access to safe obstetric care. Women are going to die in labour. So in the Afar area, when we started working there, 1 in 12 women died during their lifetime trying to have a baby. Wow. And women would get fistula. And so I've personally operated on about 7,000 women just like Ngolo, and going back to Africa in a month or two to operate, there's about 90 more waiting to be operated on. And so I'm in Australia now, commuting back to Africa while the boys go to school. But that's lovely surgery. It's very addictive. So after 2 weeks of catheters in Ngolo's bladder, we removed the catheter, and she was completely dry, completely cured, absolutely overjoyed. Her life was transformed. She was no longer sobbing. She just had tears of joy, and she was jumping up and down saying, I can't wait to go back home to rejoin my family. I'm never going to meet another man. I'm never going to be married again. Yep. And I'm going to go to school and start a new life. So her life was changed, which we're very, very thankful for. So I've been involved in fistula surgery since 1996 in various degrees. I lived in Ethiopia for 10 years and ran fistula units there. But then in 2011, 2009, I started my own charity called the Barbara May Foundation to take what the Hamlins had started in Ethiopia and spread it to the rest of Africa. So the Hamlin organisation still just does it in Ethiopia. We actually fill in the gaps where the Hamlin organisation can't reach in Ethiopia, and we've taken it to the rest of Africa from anywhere, helped start fistula hospitals anywhere between Sierra Leone to Madagascar to Nepal and everywhere between. So the work certainly spread, but more importantly, it's preventable. We used to have fistula in Australia, America, Europe back in the 1800s. Actually, the world's first fistula hospital was opened in 1855 in New York because America had fistulas. So that closed in 1906 because there was no fistulas left, because all women could get access to safe obstetric care. And it's going to be the same in Africa until all women get safe obstetric care. So with my own charity, the Barbara May Foundation, we've been building maternity hospitals and running them so women can get obstetric care for free. So each year we deliver about 15,000 ladies for free across our networks, but there's plenty more work to do, and we're hoping to expand.
Absolutely. And I'm sure the team is growing with you as well. Have you had the pleasure of being able to train other surgeons to assist you in the work that you do?
Yeah, so all over Africa, there's probably not a country that I haven't trained a surgeon from. So there's fistula surgeons all over the place now. As I said, from anywhere between Sierra Leone to Madagascar to Nepal and everywhere between. So that's exciting. And I can't remember the last time I operated without a trainee. We're also training midwives. So each year we train around 100 midwives in clinical skills, which is very valuable on the prevention side as well.
Absolutely. Such incredible work. And to think that all of this began with a dream from a 6-year-old version of yourself. How did you ever imagine you would end up where you are today?
Um, uh, it was never far from a thought that I'd be a missionary doctor, and so I have
Yeah.
been. And I thought I would spend my whole life in Africa. We moved back to Australia 3 years ago for family reasons, and for kids high schooling. We stayed there for primary schooling for our boys because my wife's a teacher, and she built a school in Ethiopia to send them to, and also built another school in Tanzania so they could go to school there, which blessed many hundreds of other children as well. But high school is a different option, different. What's the word I'm looking for? A different help me there.
Situation. Yeah, a
Situation.
different
Okay.
beast. Yeah.
Yeah, different beast. Yeah, not the word I would have chosen, but beast is good. But yeah, so yeah, high school's a different prospect. So building a high school is much more challenging. So we came back for family reasons and the kids' education, and I commute back. So I've still been able to commute back during the coronavirus times. The government's kindly given me permission to travel back. Hopefully going back again in October. Yeah, but we'll see if I get permission for this trip as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's another thing you'd have to navigate now. Do you need to get permission for each and every trip that you
Yep.
do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the hardest thing is getting in and out of Australia, of course. Once
Mm-hmm.
you get out of Australia, it's fine. Traveling around Africa is no trouble. Yeah, it's just the hassle's getting in and out of Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that leads me to another question then. Like, has since COVID's kind of taken over the world, have you had to change the ways in which you treat your patients and things like that when you head over to Africa, or is it very, very straightforward and business as
I
usual,
mean,
I guess?
our business as usual in Africa. I mean, the countries have had lockdowns to various degrees, but the lockdowns themselves have caused a lot of suffering. So, I mean, if you're in a culture that you have to earn your $2 a day to buy food, and if you can't buy, earn your $2 a day, then you go without food. And lockdowns meant that women couldn't get to hospital. So they were delivering at home. Many more women were dying. Many more children were dying. The rate of childhood malaria and childhood malaria deaths has skyrocketed. So many places have said, look, we can't afford to lock down. We'll just go ahead because it's actually killing more people than coronavirus was. So difficult balance, and it's exactly the same thing we saw on Ebola time as well. I mean, you have to lock down Ebola because between 50 to 90% of people who get Ebola die. So it's pretty awful. So in Sierra Leone, we had partnering with projects there, and so Sierra Leone was locked down for 18 months, and I was one of the first people that went in after the Ebola restrictions lifted, and we had many, many more fistula patients because of the lockdowns, because women couldn't get to hospital. If they did get to hospital, doctors didn't want to treat them because it's transmitted by blood, and there's a lot of blood during delivery, and so all women were dying from pregnancy and getting fistula during the Ebola lockdown. So we're expecting the same now as well. But our maternity hospitals have been full and overflowing because we've been providing all the staff and patients with PPE masks and so forth. So people feel safe to come and deliver in our hospitals. And so that's been business as usual, probably busier than usual in our maternity hospitals during this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the old adage, everyone's being locked down. What can you do? Yeah. But how amazing that they have those facilities there now, and and obviously that's the prevention side of the fistula as well. They've got those medical experts that can help women deliver safely. So that's so amazing. Excellent. Now, we've spent all this time and we haven't really once mentioned your book. So I
Okay.
know from our previous discussion, you said you were a bit of a reluctant author, which makes you a little bit different to a lot of the guests I've had on the show in where they've often been dreaming of being an author or writing a book for a number of years, and they've finally realized that goal. Whereas it was someone who actually approached you to write a book, and that may have been the first time you'd considered doing it. Is that correct?
More or less. There's been some pressure for some years for me to write a book of my story. I've written other books like medical textbooks, but that's kind of not the same genre, about fistula surgery and that sort of thing. But so they, I've never really wanted to write a story with myself as the main character, biography. I thought, it's quite an irksome thing to do. I don't want to do that. But then an author heard me on a podcast and said, "Oh, you really must write this down. There's been many, many, many stories like Ngolo." And I thought, and my board, the charity board, Barbara May Foundation board, have been on at me for years. And so to do this, and I said, no. But this author was very persistent, Patrick Kennedy, and I said, well, I'm not going to do it. How about you do it? But then it worked out that it was too difficult for him to do it and going backwards and forwards. So I just wrote it, and he edited it as the ghostwriter. So it's done. It's out of the way. But I appear as a character in the book, perhaps, but I'd rather have it emphasised on the story of the women and their resilience, their bravery. They are absolutely remarkable women. There's the strength of what these women have been through and how they've endured it and how they've come out the other end. And so that was my main focus of the story, and also my motivation as well, which has been my faith as a missionary doctor. But yeah, trying to make those two the highlights of the book rather than just, I did this, I did that type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Very humble. But that's leads me to another question then, and that's, what sort of life lessons or things have these women taught you as you come to meet them and know them and experience just a small part of their lives? What sort of things have you gleaned from them?
Yeah, I mean, Africa has taught me so much. I think I've learned much, much more living there for 17 years. Well, being involved in Africa for the last 25 years or so. Spent most of the last 25 years there all up because I've been going backwards and forwards. So full time there, anyway. They're a long time. I've learned much more from them than they have from me, and part about what it is to be human and to be in part of a community. I remember once, very early in my career, I had a patient that I couldn't cure. She had injuries that were so severe, which happens in a small percentage of these fistula ladies. And I tried, but the operation failed. And I was on the verge of tears, explaining to her that, we've done our best, but we just couldn't help you. And she said, "Oh, don't worry, because everyone else has rejected me, but you've held me, you've put your arm around me, you've helped me, you've cared for me, and you've loved me, and that's enough." And so just to share love with people, and to share Christ's compassion, as I see him as the source of the compassion that I have for these ladies, has been probably the most valuable lesson. And that's much more what it is to be human. I mean, you can achieve things, you can build hospitals, you can build, buy yourself a car or a house, whatever. All these things will fade away. They'll crumble away one day. But if you share that humanity and those love for your fellow human being and get really involved in their lives and seek their good rather than your own, I think that's much more of a long-lasting, significant thing. So that's been a valuable lesson. It's a basic Christian principle, which I've found to be just true over and over again in my life. But the strength of these women too, they don't blame. I found it very striking coming back to Australia. Well, first of all, how alone people seem in Australia after you're in a community like Africa, but how individualistic people are. So, for example, what I've learned from these ladies is how outwardly looking they are, even though they've been through such immense suffering. There's no victim sort of mentality. If I could tell you just one horrific story from Congo during the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, rather, during the war, I was able to get in just in a window period of a ceasefire and help a number of patients. And one of the ladies had been gang raped by 10 soldiers and then shot in the vagina to cause a fistula just in the forest and left for dead. She was found and brought to the mission hospital that I went to, and awful suffering, awful injuries, and far worse stories than that as well. But this particular lady, I spoke to her and said, why do you seem so happy? I mean, you've been through such because she was just smiling and radiant and joyous. And I said, how can you be like this when you've been through such immense suffering and abuse? She said,
Mm.
oh, because God has looked after me and he's brought me people to help me every step of the way, and now I'm getting cured. So, I mean, just looking forward and putting those horrible things behind you and having a simple faith is just, yeah, it's strengthened my faith by meeting these ladies.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you process, seeing some of these, meeting these incredible women obviously is a highlight for you, but having to, I guess, process their traumatic stories and see the injuries that they've sustained. How do you process that on an emotional level and move through that and not let it kind of bog you down, I guess?
Um, Maybe I'm looking at things a bit too simplistically, perhaps,
No,
but
well,
no.
everyone's different, so.
But yeah, no, I mean, you just focus on how you can help these ladies and get them better.
Mm,
And I couldn't do it without, I mean, been in all sorts of difficult situations, from, Somalia to the Congo to, Sierra Leone, and all sorts of difficult and stressful places. And the old saying goes that there's no atheist in on the front line or in the trenches, sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah, you learn to pray very quickly when you've got a gun pointed at your head and that sort of thing. So yeah, it strengthens your faith, and I've had God just pull through with quite miraculous answers to prayers time and time again.
Mm.
And when you look outwards and upwards to God, I think that really puts a different perspective to your life and a different strength to your life than if you're looking inwards. The times of my life that I've just looked inwards, I've just been full of disappointment and despair. But if I look upwards and outwards to God, then it's strengthened me to do this, and do it with a degree of joy as well.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I guess that's probably the same thing that leads you, you've mentioned a few times now there's been a break in a hostile situation, or, a massive virus has just cleared and now you're straight in there. So it's always leading you towards the work and towards the women to assist where you can.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so even in the pandemic, I can't wait to get back in. Although it's still uncertain that I can get back to Australia each time I've gone. I've gone 3 times during the pandemic so far, and so far so good. Been able to get back. We'll see what happens this time. It's always a bit uncertain.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
absolutely.
it shouldn't stop you doing what's the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, that's it.
Mm.
It's the greater good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. And so, what I've found from interviewing guests on this show, The Phoenix Phenomenon, is that a lot of people experience, some great revelations or some greater understandings about themselves as they write their life stories and share their books with the world. So that's why I've called the show The Phoenix Phenomenon, because everyone has, a bit of a phoenix moment, if you like. But I was curious to find out, you've mentioned that it was more about sharing the ladies' stories, but were there any, I guess, insights you had into yourself and your journey that you had as you were writing your book?
Um, that's going to be a disappointing answer, but probably no.
Yeah, excellent.
Yes, because I did try and focus the book on the women and their
Yes.
strength and fortitude. Um, did it reveal anything about me? I would just fall back onto that it's been my faith that sustained me through all these
Mm,
difficulties. I mean, there's hasn't been a week or a few days that I've met some difficult challenge, and I thought, what on earth am I doing here? And I just come on my knees before God, and He's given me the strength to persevere. And so, as for me, I've just found myself quite weak and frail, but it's gone God who's given me the strength to be able to persevere through many challenges. And yeah, thank God through my family has been persevering as well. Although the boys, they would much rather be back in Africa. They often say, "Oh, why did you bring us back to this country? Why didn't we stay in Africa?" So yeah, that was their home. That's where they grew up. That's what they know. That's what they loved. But here we are in Australia
yeah. Well,
for
they
the
may
time
very
being.
well head back, do you think, once they
I think,
graduated and they've found their path?
yeah, they may well do.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, that's great. And so I wanted to see if you had any advice for people who are looking to write their own books. To share any advice you might have had, or any tips that you learned as you were going through the process yourself that might be helpful for people.
Well, for me, I mean, I must confess that it was English almost didn't get me the marks get into medicine. So I was never very good at English at school.
Yeah, yeah.
But you had to include it for your HSC. So that was my downfall and almost didn't enable me to get into medicine. So yeah, just even though, yeah, just give it a go. It was actually quite fun writing a lot of the stories, especially the stories about the women and recalling them and the situations we were in. Yeah, it was good fun, but for me, it was wonderful that I had a ghostwriter to help me along the way, because English and communication was never really my strength.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was
Ex
fun. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's
But
good.
I'm glad it's out of the way.
Yeah. And but now that it is out of the way and it is out in there in the world, have you had some feedback from people who have been inspired by the work that you do and maybe
Yeah.
wanting to follow a similar path?
Yeah, lots actually. That's been quite fun, and people from all sorts of places. Yeah, so I got an email just yesterday from a guy who was a few years ahead of me at school, ended up in Africa as well, and that I never knew. So that was fun. And yeah, many people, like a GP from Nepal, wrote to me and, yeah, thanked me for all the work in Nepal, and just all sorts of fun little links. Yeah, many, quite a number every day, which has been really enjoyable to read and encouraging. I think, oh, maybe writing the book was a worthwhile thing.
Well, absolutely. And not only that, but it's another platform to create awareness
Yeah,
about,
that's right.
what is happening over the other side of the world and how much help these women need. So
Yeah, that's right. So if it helps us help more women, and then that's all been all worthwhile.
absolutely. All right. And
Mm.
would you say that became one of your major motivators early on in the piece when you went, okay, I'm going to write this book?
Yeah, that
Was
was
that
the
one of
only.
the major motivators that kept you going?
Yeah, that was really the only reason. I mean, the ghostwriter Patrick and the board were insistent that it's going to help us more, help more ladies. So that was the final deal breaker. I guess I wouldn't have done it for any other reason.
Excellent. All right, wonderful. And so for listeners who have been inspired by your story and want to know how they can help, how can they best help your work and the foundation?
Oh, well, pick up a book. I've got one over here actually. The Doctor in Africa. Yeah, and then it's available in all bookstores. But our foundation, the Barbara May Foundation, you can just Google that, barbaramayfoundation.com or .org. Both go to our address and find a little bit more about us. Sign up for the newsletter. I mean, we are dependent on funds, so our all women get treated for their fistula for free and have their delivery with us for free, and all our outreach into the community to educate people is all done for free. But we need funds for it, and it doesn't cost much. I mean, 200 Australian dollars is it all it costs for one woman to have all her 4 clinic visits while she's pregnant, and all her labs and her ultrasound to deliver in our hospitals, including a chance of a 14% chance of a cesarean, a postnatal visit, immunise a child. Well, that whole package is a 200 Australian dollars. So it doesn't
Yeah.
cost a great deal, and we get the similar results as the hospitals here in Australia. So yeah, a little bit of money can go a long way.
Absolutely. And was there I guess a figure that you could put out there as to how much a fistula surgery would cost for a woman?
Yeah, so that's about $500,
Mm-hmm.
between 400 or 500, depending which hospital we're working in. So Tanzania is a bit more expensive. Ethiopia is a bit cheaper. Yeah, so we'll call it about $450 then. Yeah,
Excellent.
so
All
that's
right.
transporting the woman so she can get to hospital for free, the 2-week hospital stay, all her meals, operation, medicines, yeah, $400.
Yeah. And it's life changing. Like
And
this is
life
literally
changing.
saving lives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
How incredible. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of the amazing work that you're doing with us today, Dr. Browning, and also for giving us some insights into the creation of your book, A Doctor in Africa. So, if anyone wants to reach out to Andrew, you've head over to those websites, buy a copy of the book. And yeah, we'd love to see some of you digging deep and helping to support this amazing cause. So,
great. Well, thank you very much, Roxanne.